Well, we are wrapping up this series, part 4 of the new rules for love, sex, and dating. Thanks for those of you who are married for being patient while we talk to single people for a few weeks. However, as I said a couple weeks ago, most of the emails I get have been from married people. And most of you have said, gee, I wish I had heard this when I was younger. And I think to myself, that's exactly why we're doing this now. So thank you for creating a church and environment where we can just pause and talk about some of this stuff. Now, if you've been here all along, you know this whole series is basically hung on one simple question. And the question is this: are you who, yes, there you are. Are you who the person you are looking for is looking for? And instead of looking for someone and thinking, if I can find the right person, the right things will happen. We talked about that the first week. That's called the right person myth. We decided, you know what? Instead of looking for the right person, why not spend these years of our lives as single people becoming the right person? And if you become the right person, chances are you have a better odds or better chance of meeting the right person. But this is a process. And so the question for you, and the question I want to leave you with, and the big takeaway from the whole series is, are you in the process of becoming the person that the person you're looking for is looking for? Now, from the very outset, I've said that part of the reason I wanted to do this series was to say some things that I thought everybody knew. Sometimes common sense isn't so common. And when we're in love, we lose our minds. And that's part of being in love, is losing your minds. And so we wanted to pause in this series and just sort of state the obvious, because sometimes the obvious isn't so obvious. And so as we wrap up this series, what I want to do is I want to take you to one central idea, and then at the end of the message, I'm going to give you a whole bunch of applications. I mean, like a lot. Like we're dumping the kitchen sink into this final message as we'd have this one more opportunity to say to single people, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. Marriage is awesome. Marriage can be incredible. You never hear about the great marriages because they're boring, and when you're on the outside looking in, but when you're on the inside, it's awesome. We want you to have an awesome, boring marriage, drama-free, full of love and secrets and things you don't tell people about because it's so awesome, okay? And the great news is this: if you're single and you've never been married, you get to get this right the first time. So today, I'm going to give you all the rest of the secrets. We've been sort of, giving a few secrets at a time. Today, we're dumping all the secrets on you. Now, single people, here's something you don't know. Every single Saturday in this city, and every single Saturday in every city in this country, and every single Saturday in countries all over the world, single people get all dressed up. The bride puts on a white dress or an almost white dress, and she looks as beautiful as she's ever looked. And the man looks way more handsome than he actually is, and he puts on a tux. And they have spent thousands of dollars and weeks and weeks and weeks and months and months and months preparing for this day. And they come together and they stand at an altar in this thing we call a wedding, and they hold hands, they exchange rings, and then somebody like me or a pastor says, repeat after me, and they take vows. And every single Saturday in this city and in cities all over the country, single people make promises that they can't keep. Now they mean well, they're not lying. Most of the time they're not like overtly lying. It's just that they make promises they are not prepared to keep. And they mean well. And then after they're married, a week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 3 or 4 months or 6 months, they realize, you know what, I know this is what I said, but this is hard. And all of a sudden they begin to realize, I really did mean it. I meant it when I said it. And then they start holding each other accountable, like, but you said and you promised. And the next thing you know, it's commitment wars, but you committed. And the reason is, and single people, I'm telling you, the married people around you, they didn't discover this till after they were married, so I'm giving you a big heads up. People get married and make promises they can't keep and make vows they can't fulfill, and they want to and they try, but they just aren't prepared to do it. And the reason they're not prepared is that they overlooked a principle that all of us understand in every other realm of life, but when it comes to relationships, we don't think this is true. And here's the principle. Promises are no substitute for preparation. Promises are no substitute for preparation. If you've ever entered a long distance race or you're a long distance runner, you know all about this. It's one thing to sign up for the race. It's another thing to prepare for it. And if you're not prepared, it's a waste of time to promise that you'll finish. Because what determines whether or not you finish a long distance race is not the promise. It's not even your signature. It's whether or not you've prepared. This is true in every realm of life. You know, a kid can promise the parent what they're going to make on the SAT, but what you make on the SAT has very little to do with what you promise. It has everything to do with how much you've prepared. And we could go on and on and on. I could tell you that next week I'm going to preach in French, and I could promise you and commit to you and sign a piece of paper. Next week I'm preaching in French, and we could have witnesses and a notary public and the whole deal, and you could show up next week. And I'm not going to be able to preach in French no matter how much I commit to you because I haven't prepared. I don't speak French. Now, if you gave me a long time, maybe, but I can't do it next week. Well, see, you're like, well, duh, everybody understands that. But I'm telling you, when it comes to relationships, people think, I can promise my way past my lack of preparation. Let me put it this way. Just because you say I do doesn't make you able. Just because you say I do doesn't make you capable. It only makes you accountable. And when you're accountable for something you're not capable of doing, you become miserable, okay? And there are a lot of people who are locked in marriages where they're miserable because they know what they're accountable for and they just aren't able to pull it off. It's kind of like Ron White. I don't know if you heard Ron White tell a story about when he was arrested for being in public drunkenness. Have you heard this story? And and when he tells the story, he says, I had the right to remain silent. I did not have the ability to do so, okay? And I'm telling you, this is what happens every single Saturday. It'll catch on later. Every single Saturday, people look at each other and they make a promise and they really mean it. They just don't have the ability to pull it off. In fact, I would go so far to say this, that when it comes to marriage, commitment is really overrated. I'm serious. And here's why I say that. I've sat with couples who said, they look at each other across the table, but when we got married, you promised. When we got married, you took a vow. When we got married, and they're like commitment wars, but you promised, and I'm going, this is irrelevant. The commitment's way overrated when it comes to marriage. Because if you commit to something you can't do, the commitment's worthless. And if you promise something you can't fulfill because you're unable, you're unprepared, the promise is worthless. But I'm telling you, single people, let me tell you what's going to happen to you if you don't listen and if you're not careful. You're going to fall in love, and you're going to think that your ability to commit will override your lack of preparation. Worse than that, you're going to allow some person that you've fallen in love with to convince you that their track record is irrelevant, that the patterns of their life are irrelevant, that the pathways they've chosen are irrelevant, that basically when they marry you, they're going to make a commitment and they're going to automatically change. And you need to understand, a lack of preparation cannot be trumped by a promise. Promises don't matter a bit if a person hasn't prepared. And here's the great news for you. Between now and the time you get married, you get to prepare. You've got time. Now the problem is, and this is the part I don't know how to communicate very well, you will never be less motivated than now to deal with this. People don't get motivated to deal with these things until they're in a bad marriage, and they're really motivated. They spend a lot of money and a lot of time, and in some cases, it's just too late. So you're not going to be that motivated, but now's the time because now you have the time to prepare. And so if you just get one thing out of this message, here's what I want you to hear me say. I want you to prepare to commit. I want you to prepare to commit. I want you to prepare to commit so that when you make a commitment, when you make a promise, when you take a vow, you will be in a position to where you will be able to fulfill your promise. And here's what will happen. If you make a decision to prepare to commit and you devote yourself to that, you will be highly unlikely to marry somebody who has not prepared to commit themselves. Because your life will be moving in such a specific direction. Anyone whose life is not moving in that same direction will be in such conflict with your values and conflict with your way of life that you won't be interested, and perhaps they won't be interested in you either. Now, the interesting thing is you probably couldn't argue with that. I mean, when you think about running, when you think about work, when you think about the SAT, when you think about swimming, there's so many arenas where you realize, a promise is worthless. It's preparation that makes the difference. And you probably wouldn't argue with me that this is probably true relationally. But the interesting thing is this. In the Old Testament, the wisest man who ever lived, Solomon, speaks directly into this dynamic. And I want to look at two verses. We're just going to look at two verses. I want to sort of tease these things out a little bit. So maybe you could go back, memorize one of these verses or both of these, and let these sort of be a pillar that kind of holds this whole thing together for you as you think about the importance of committing not to a person, but committing to the process of being in a position to be able to keep your commitments, the thing that you have time to do, the thing that you should be doing now as you prepare to become the person you're looking for is looking for. So I want to read these 2 verses for you, explain them to you a little bit. Then I'm going to give you some very, very painfully specific applications. Okay, here's the first verse. Here's what he says. He uses this word prudent. Let me define this for you before I read the verse. We don't use this terminology very much. A prudent person in the Old Testament, the Hebrew word that's translated prudent, a prudent person is a person that understands that all of life is connected. A prudent person understands that what happened yesterday impacts tomorrow. A prudent person is a person that understands that what I'm doing today, as we talked about in the first week, will eventually become my past, and it will show up in my future. The prudent person understands that if you're going in this direction, it's a pretty good idea of where you're going to end up. So the prudent person understands that all of life is connected. So here's what Solomon says. The wisdom of the prudent, the future-oriented person, is to give thought to their, say this word with me, ways. Let me tell you what ways are. Ways are behaviors. Ways are patterns. Ways are habits. Ways are trends. Ways are what makes us predictable. Ways are why your parents know what you're going to do before you do it. They know what you're going to say before you say it. Ways are why you can predict your parents' response to a question even before you ask it. Everybody has ways, habits, patterns, paths. Here's what he's saying. This is staggering. The wise person, the person that's prudent, they give thought to their ways. In other words, they pay attention to how they do things, how they manage things, because the prudent person knows the best indicator of my future behavior is my what? My past behavior. That's right. If I want to know where I'm actually going to be, all I have to do is look back to see where I've been and what direction I'm headed in. So the prudent person pays attention not to commitments and promises, because those don't indicate anything. They pay attention to their paths. But the folly or the stupidity, the folly of fools is deception. Now, that in and of itself doesn't make a lot of sense, but when you contrast this in this little proverb, that's what proverbs are. There's generally 2 statements that contrast and to make one simple point. Here's his point, that whereas the prudent person is constantly examining and evaluating their ways, their patterns, their habits, their behaviors, their trends, their flow of their life, the fool, on the other hand, doesn't pay attention to those things. The fool, on the other hand, thinks, you know what, regardless of how my life has usually gone, regardless of how I've usually responded, regardless of my current habits, somehow I think I'm going to end up in a place that nothing I'm currently doing points me in that direction. That somehow good things are going to magically happen. I don't know how, I don't know why, but there's no point in trying to evaluate where I'm going to be based on what I'm currently doing. The prudent person says, no, it's all about your ways, your habits, your behaviors, your trends. Here's the second way he says it. This is even more to the point. The simple believe anything. Now, single people, I just got to warn you. When you fall in love, you'll believe anything. Because you and your boyfriend, girlfriend, or fiance, you have a song. We have a song. And your parents are going, yeah, but does he have a job? And you're going, he doesn't need a job. We have a song. And the other day, I went to the mall and I parked right beside him. There was an empty parking spot right beside him. Really. And then he bought me this little puppy, this little dog. And you know what? On the way home, we passed his house and they had the same dog. It's like, oh my gosh, we'll get married now. I mean, see what happens when we get engaged, we fall in love. Part of it is we lose our mind. And when you lose your mind in love, you know what? You will believe anything. So the guy comes to her and says, well, you know, I know this is wrong with me, and this is wrong with me, and this is wrong with me. I don't have this, and I haven't done this, and I haven't paid any attention to it. But if you'll marry me, I'll change. And see, the prudent person is going, let's talk about your paths. The in-love person says, I'm going to focus on your promise. And Solomon says, okay, I'm all for love, but that's just stupid. That's just stupid, okay? And simple people, and sometimes when you fall in love, you get kind of simple, you get kind of stupid, you get kind of gaga, and that's okay when you're in love. That's why I want you to work on this before you fall in love. Because a simple person will believe anything. I'm telling you, Sandra and I have sat with couples who are wanting to get married, they're engaged couples, and we sit with them and they want to meet with us, you know, and we used to do this a lot. We don't do this very much anymore. And we would sit and listen to her, it was usually the girl, explain away her fiance's bad behavior. Well, he had this problem, and he had this problem, and he had this problem, and this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. But now, you know, he promises, and he's going to change, and he's going to change, and he's going to change. And we're like, we're not buying it. Because promises mean nothing. Promises mean nothing. It's the pathways. And here you are in love, and you're believing this. You're believing this guy. But kids, this is why your parents freak out over your friends and the guys and the girls that you bring home. Because again, you guys have a song, and they're looking at paths and trends and behaviors and previous relationships and how much debt did you say he had and how long has he been divorced, really? And they're like, oh my gosh, run. And you're like, yeah, but our initials are the same. It's like, oh, well then let's just have a ceremony now, you know? And I'm kind of making fun, but I'm telling you, when you fall in love, you'll believe anything. Now listen to what Solomon contrasts that with. The simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps. Say this word with me. Do you know why that's an important word? Because steps, when you look at a person's steps, you can tell where they're going. See, words are meaningless. Promises are meaningless. Commitments are almost meaningless. It's the past that's the best indicator of where a person is headed and where they will probably end up. That's true of who you date, and that's true of who you are. You can summarize it this way with this statement. That paths people choose trump the commitments they make. The paths people choose trump the commitments they make. When you look at your life, when you examine the life of the people you're dating, the question is not where are they and not what they have they promised. The question is where have they been and where are they headed. Last little pithy statement, then we're going to move on, is this. Same idea. The past is a better indicator than a promise. The past is a better indicator than a promise. So here's all I'm saying. If you're committed to becoming the person you're looking for is looking for, if you're committed to becoming the kind of person that would attract the person you hope to attract, if you're committed to this process, then here's what I want you to commit to. I want you to commit now. Next slide. I want you to commit now to becoming someone who can keep their commitments later. I want you to commit now, not to a person, not to a relationship, not to a marriage. I want you to commit now to becoming someone who can keep their commitments later. This is the goal. This is what you should be working on, so that when you say I do, you really can do, you know? When you say I will, that you'll have the ability to actually follow through. You won't be one of those people that means well and is not capable, but becomes accountable and then is miserable. You don't have to do that. But what determines whether or not you're going to be ready to actually fulfill what you promise is what you do between now and then. And if you will commit now to becoming the kind of person who can commit and keep their promises and their vows later, then you'll be good to go. So here's what I want to do in our remaining few minutes. I want to go through a list. I'm going to go through these pretty quick. The first one will take a little longer than the rest, but I'm going to hit these quick. I want to give you some very, very, very specific single people assignments as you think about what you need to be in the process of doing now, committing to now, so that when you make a commitment later, you'll actually be able to keep your promise. And let me say in general, the things that we talk about at this church week after week after week, online or live, the things that we talk about week after week are some of those things. A few weeks ago, Jeff Henderson did an incredible message on forgiveness. As a single person, you need to develop the habit of forgiving. A few weeks ago, we talked about confession and learning to confess to other people and having accountability. You need to do that as a single person. That generally, everything we talk about at this church week to week in all of our environments are things that if you'll embrace these habits, if these will become your ways, your patterns, your behaviors, your habits, then you are equipping yourself to be in a position to say yes, I do, and mean what you say. Ladies, here's what you need to do to get ready. Don't dress like a commodity and don't put up with being treated like one. This goes back to the second week. Don't dress like a commodity and don't put up with being treated like one. Now, ladies, listen to me. If in your dating, you get in the habit of being treated like a commodity, guess what's going to happen when you're married? Your husband's going to do the same thing. If he dated you like a commodity, he's going to treat you like a commodity. You should have no tolerance for being treated like a commodity. None at all. None at all. And this may go back to step one that we just went through, but you need to deal with this. And ladies, just a little tip from the world of fishing. Do you know how a fisherman determines what to bait his hook with? What he's fishing for. That's pretty deep. Let me go over that again. Do you know what how a fisherman determines what to bait his hook with? It depends on what he's fishing for. Ladies, if you fish with your body, you're going to catch body snatchers every single time, okay? I'm just telling you. If you troll with your bodies, you're going to catch, and this is what you're going to say. You're going to say, all men are alike. All men are alike. And I'm going to tell you now what I tell young ladies when they tell me that. I say, no, not all men are alike. All the men you date are alike. Ooh, that's what happens. Ooh, you know. Then they get mad at me. And then I say this, all the men you go out with are alike, and all the men that ask you out are alike. Now, let me ask you a question. Let's take the last 10 guys you've dated. And let's look at those. There was him and you, 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 him and you. What is the common denominator in all those dates? That would be you. So come on. And ladies, I'm not upset with you. I just want to, listen. God created you. You are so much more than a body. Save the body for later. I'm telling you, save it for later. Don't troll with your body. That's a no-win for you. Troll with your love for God, your passion for God, your brain, your job. I mean, you have so many other things going for you. Don't troll around with your body. You're going to end up in the same kind of relationships over and over. You're going to get jaded, and you're going to think all men are pigs. And most of them are, but there are a lot of men who actually aren't. And here's the thing, and going back to the point of this message, I want you to be prepared to keep the promises you make, which means you've got to marry somebody who's prepared to keep his promises. And if you catch him with your body and the way you dress, you're going to have to keep him with your body and the way you dress. And I have some bad news for you. As cute as you are now, that's all I'm going to say. Okay. Just saying. Men, here's your memorize part 2 of this series. That's all you got to do. Along with that, okay, broader ideas is break your bad habits. Now, let me tell you why I put this one in here. Single people. Marriage was not designed to solve any problems. That's not what it is. It doesn't solve any problems. In marriage, the great things get better and the bad things get worse generally. It doesn't solve any problems. So if you have a bad habit now, then you're going to have a bad habit and be married. That's all that's going to happen. If you drink too much now, you drink too much then. You got a prescription addiction thing, it's just going to get worse, except somebody's going to know. You got a gambling thing now, it's just going to be worse. You got a porn thing now, it's just going to be worse. You got a debt thing, shopping thing, can't stay out of debt thing, it's just going to be worse. To prepare to be able to look at somebody and say this, I'm going to honor and cherish you. You're going to be the priority of my life. I'm never going to do anything to hurt you or to harm this relationship. Then break your bad habits now, and you already know what they are. Now let me flip this around and see if this doesn't make sense. Don't you hope that the guy you marry someday or the girl you marry someday, wouldn't it be great if before they married you, they broke all their bad habits? Do you really? Well, here's what happens. He comes along and he says, yeah, well, I got this thing over here on the side that I struggle with, but baby, sugar baby, once you marry me, you'll be able to help me. Yeah, all the married people went, oh. And ladies, you just look at him and say, you need your mama and a counselor, not me. Okay, so go make an appointment with a counselor and talk to your mama. I'm not here to help you with your bad habits. I want to be loved and I want to be cherished. I don't want to prop you up. And you say, Andy, that doesn't sound very loving. It's not meant to be loving. This is just the reality. You need to be a whole person who's looking for a whole person. And when you see a person with a hole in them, you say, hey, you're great. Let's have dinner. But you got issues to deal with. Don't complicate, because once you get married, everything gets more complicated. Everything gets more complicated. And I promise you this, I would bet my car on this, that whatever their issue is 6 months into your marriage, it will be your fault. And you're going, how in the world could they spin a gambling habit into being my fault? You just wait. It's amazing how creative married people get. 6 months in, whatever their issue was before they married you will somehow be your fault. You've been warned. I don't want you to deal with that. Okay, men, here's what you need to do. Memorize part 2 of this series, okay? Because ladies, they don't listen. So I thought I just had to say it twice. Okay. All right. Next one, I'm going to hit these quick. When you're dating, postpone the physical of your dating relationships ALAP, as long as possible. Okay, and when I physical, I'm not talking about sex, I'm just talking about everything else, okay? Just postpone the physical. And let me tell you, I've been doing this a long time. I've never heard anyone say to me, you know, I think our relationship would have been better and healthier if we'd gotten physical faster. Never heard that. But I can't even begin to tell you how many times people have said, you know what, we got physical quick. I mean, first date, second date, third date, I spent the night, and next thing, because you know this, the physical part of a relationship, it's a fog, it's a mist. Women, you want to know he's coming back. You want to know he's coming back. And he's over there going, that wasn't quite what I thought it would be. That wasn't quite what I thought it would be. And then you're in trouble. So just postpone the physical. And ladies, if some guy ditches you because 3 or 4 dates in, you're not going to let him come in and roll around on the couch. You just say, hey, you know, you need a mama and a counselor, okay? I'm not that person. It's okay. And guys, if you just feel like it's just come on, just remember, you're not the first guy. So come on. I'm just saying, you're looking for the one, not everyone. And on this series, I said this isn't for people who are just players. This is for people who see dating as a means to an incredible end. Just postpone the physical as long as possible. Put it off so long that they begin to wonder if you're even interested in that part. And then when it comes up, you go, oh yeah, I'm interested. Last thing on this is huge. Do the research, Google it for yourself. I'm not making this up. Self-control before you're married results in self-control after you're married. You know why? Listen to me. Because self-control is a path. Self-control is a behavior. Self-control is a pattern. The men and women that are most, if I can use a term we don't use much, the men and women that are most promiscuous before their marriage are far, check it out yourself, far more likely to have an affair after marriage. The statistics are in. I mean, the research is in. People have tracked this for years and years and years. The best thing you can do to invest in your future marriage is to exercise self-control while you date and to date somebody that does the same thing, because the past is a better indicator of the future than a promise any day of the week. Along these same lines, and I almost decided not to do this one, is, go to the next one if we could, is avoid living together. Now, again, don't take my word for it. You know, chalk me up as the religious guy. What would you expect the preacher to say? Look at the research yourself. There is no evidence at all, and a lot of research has been done on this. There is no evidence at all that living together prepares anyone for marriage. The opposite is true. The opposite is true. Check it out yourself. Couples who live together have a far higher chance of divorce. An individual that has lived with 2 or 3 people, it is almost a 0 possibility for them, according to the statistics, almost 0 chance that your first marriage will last. Now, I understand this about statistics. They're only important if they support what you're currently doing. See there? We're right. No one ever makes relationship decisions based on statistics because you think you're going to be the exception. But I just got to tell you, because I love you, this is not a path to happily ever after. To become the person that the person you're looking for is looking for, to become a person that can actually say yes and mean it, you need to be very, very involved in your local church. And let me tell you why this is so huge, okay? Whenever I meet couples, I say, young couples, I say, where did you meet? How did you meet? I ask that question all the time. I love it. I've heard this so many times that, you know what happens? They come to this church, they come to one of our churches or one of our strategic partners all over the country, and they start volunteering. And they're volunteering with middle schoolers and volunteering with middle schoolers. And one afternoon they're in middle school and they look over and think, well, now he doesn't look like a middle schooler. And they meet somebody whose flow is in the same direction. They meet somebody whose path is in the same direction. You need to be involved in a great local church, and you need to serve. Because in serving, and it's not because we need people to come volunteer, it's because in an environment like this and in an environment like the ones we create, you are more likely to find the people whose lives, whose lifestyles, whose flow, whose patterns, whose behaviors, whose ways, whose paths are in sync with the ones that you're trying to establish. Sandra's mom told her early on when she was in college, she said, if you go to the right places, chances are you'll meet the right people. And it's true. Sandra and I met in a Bible study. I know that's kind of geeky for the preacher. What would you expect the preacher to meet the preacher's wife in a Bible study? But you know what? Neither one of us were looking. We were just kind of doing the things that supported the decisions that we had made as individuals. Because at the end of the day, here's singles, listen, and then I'm done. You get to do this right. No matter what you've done wrong, and no matter what is in your past, and no matter how you may have messed up in the past, going forward, you get to get it right. You get to make decisions now that will enable you to stand at an altar and say, I do, and be able to I do. To say I will and to be able to actually I will. And you'll be looking at somebody who has done the difficult work of becoming a whole person. And they will be able to give a whole person to you, and you'll be able to give a whole person to them. Not because you made a promise, not because you made a commitment, but because you made a commitment to the process of becoming someone worth pursuing, worth winning, and worth loving. And it's my heart's desire that you'll do whatever you have to do between now and then to become the person that the person you're looking for is looking for. And if you do that, that's a win for you. That's a win for your family. That's a win for this generation. It's a win for the kingdom of God. So I don't know where this lands with you. I don't know what feels like the next step is for you, but I hope you'll take it. I hope you'll go to that website, listen to those messages. I hope that God will stir stuff up in you and you'll deal with it. You'll change your habits. You'll change your patterns, and that you'll fall in love someday, not with just the right person, but the right person who became the right person because of the decisions they made in preparation for spending the rest of their life with you.